tonight we're going to talk about getting started with the Reggio Emilia approach. And this is actually a huge topic. It's pretty hard to do in under an hour. So I'm going to focus on the really key things that I think will get you guys going in the right direction, because it can be a pretty big undertaking doing it. So I wanted to really narrow down where I feel like that would give you guys the best step forward in wanting to do this. So the first thing I want to do is actually share a wonderful video called Reggio Emilia in a Nutshell. So it is a quick video. I think it's just like 2 minutes, and so I'm going to play it, and you will be able to hear it. I've tested all of this, and I will make sure I have the link for this in the notes after the live, because this is a great video to use to help educate parents on what this approach is and what it all entails as well. It's a great video to use to help educate other educators like I am with you. Okay, so we'll watch this video and then we will keep going, okay?
The Reggio Emilia Approach in a nutshell.
An educational philosophy based on the image of the child and of human beings as possessing strong potentials for development and as a subject of rights, who learns and grows in the relationships with others. Developed by a young and inspirational teacher, Loris Malaguzzi. He promoted the idea of children as active participators in their own learning in a unique reciprocal relationship with their teachers. Learning is an active process, not a transmission of pre-packaged knowledge. Rather, the child has 100 languages, meaning children have multiple ways to express themselves. In the Reggio Emilia approach, the educator is considered to be 3 things: the teacher, the child, and the environment. Teachers are given non-contact time to give them a chance to talk together about the children and to be able to write up their observations and plan what will be offered to the children next. They value and encourage child-initiated activity. They challenge and provoke ideas through open-ended questioning. They respect the child's own ideas. They allow the child to make his own mistakes and learn from them. They closely observe the children to document the child's progress and to judge appropriate moments to intervene. A Reggio school aims to create a welcoming, nurturing, home-like environment that's recognised for its potential to inspire children. It is a place of encounter and connection, interaction and dialogue.
So the next thing I want to do is getting into how do you start embracing the Reggio Emilia approach. So I would say the first thing you want to do is you want to start with why. Why do you want to embrace this new way of thinking? So there's a series of questions here that you're going to see on the screen, and this is kind of where I think you guys should start when just asking yourself, because it's really important to start building that reflective process. And these questions are simple, but they get you thinking. So why do you want to embrace this new way of thinking? And then asking yourself, what intrigued you to start on your journey? Thanks, guys. Okay, so what intrigued you? For me, it was I saw other people embracing this approach and how it was really changing them as educators and how it was changing the way they felt and what they were doing. And it sparked my curiosity, and I kind of wanted to go further within that. Then you want to start looking at, what do you know about this philosophy already? Because that gives you kind of like a starting point to see what you already currently know, and it might help direct you to where you want to go next. While you're doing some of that beginning research, you want to ask yourself, what connections do you see in this philosophy and within your own current pedagogical views already? You want to see, how does this this approach connect with what you already do, and then ask yourself why those connections there. Maybe why is there a disconnect? And then a really common one is, what obstacles do you see that may hinder you from embracing this approach? Because a lot of the time it is so different from, going from a theme-based to this much more inquiry-based, and making sure that you have the support that you're looking for from your admin team, from your fellow educators, from your parents, and all that kind of stuff. So you kind of want to look at all of those aspects as to what might you come up against. So those are just some starting questions that you can do. Okay, so within this approach, now tonight I'm only going to be talking about a really, really small amount of stuff. The foundational things are actually quite a bit, and I can't get through all of that in a short period of time. So I will have links to some really key articles that I have used myself in the notes after this, so that you guys can go further into some of this stuff. So again, I'm giving you the key stuff that I think is important that I can talk about within a half an hour or so that you can get going, okay? So within this approach, there are 3 protagonists, and that is the children, the parents, and the educator. And they all have equal roles, equal rights, and they all work in a very collaborative process, and they learn together and they learn from each other, okay? So the biggest thing that you guys need to look at is creating your image of the child. And this is some information here that I got from one of those articles that I will post. And it says, all children have preparedness, potential, curiosity. They have interest in relationship, in constructing their own learning, and negotiating with everything the environment brings to them. This is a really strong statement. The educators within the Reggio Emilia approach see children as very strong and capable and competent, and this reflects in everything that they do. The image of the child is foundational in this approach, and this is where I started, and this is where I encourage you guys to start. When I first started embracing this approach, and I was already wanting to change my entire environment, I didn't move one piece of furniture, I didn't change one basket until I had my image of the child. Now, what I will say is that your image of the child will not stay the same. It will change and grow and evolve as you evolve and change and grow in your role as an educator as well. So if you start off and you want to start writing a statement of what your image of the child is, just write what you know for right now and what you feel. It will change and grow as you go on in this journey as well, okay? So in a lot of my research, I have seen some amazing quotes from Loris Malaguzzi. So I really wanted to write this one, or to share this one, because it's kind of eye-opening. And again, I talk about using that reflective practice and how important it is. So this quote here: there are hundreds of different images of the child. Each one of you has inside yourself an image of the child that directs you as you begin to relate to a child. This theory within you pushes you to behave in certain ways. It orientates you as you talk to the child, listen to the child, and observe the child. So this is a big quote. You could spend like an hour just reflecting on this quote and breaking it down itself. So as an educator, our image of the child is influenced from our own childhoods and things that we experienced as children. And I know for me, that was really directly related to within my group. When I always thought back to my own childhood, the first things that came to my mind were I was outside playing and I was unsupervised. That was the biggest things. So that really influenced me when I was trying to create a program that worked for the children in my care. After they had been with me for a few years and we had done a lot of work and I had embraced this approach, towards the end, when they were getting close to, they were 5 and they were going to go off to kindergarten, I was really trying to embrace that lovely experience that I had as a child of having so much unsupervised play outside, because children nowadays, they don't get that. They are literally supervised all the time, between being in daycare, maybe being at home, or being in programs. Like, they don't get that unsupervised play, which is so essential to children. So for me, obviously legally, I still had to be there within my own setting watching the children. But I really tried to be a fly on the wall and give them the space, the time, and the trust to explore their ideas and to figure things out by themselves. Because when I was on the playground and I fell off the monkey bars from being upside down, and our playgrounds were filled with rocks, which is what I fell onto, breaking my, ripping my skin on my knees and bleeding and stuff, I had to figure out what to do on my own. I had to be able to communicate with my friends and asking for help. And we had to come up with a way to solve that problem and get me all bandaged up so I could go home. So children don't get that kind of experience very much anymore. And I mean, I was pretty young when that happened too, and I remember it very vividly. So that experience is very relatable to this quote. And so the things that I have as my own image of the child from my past is definitely influenced how my view of the children now. Okay. Okay, so the next protagonist is the parents or the families. So the parents are an essential component of the program, and they are competent and an active part of their children's learning experience. And I think a lot of the time we forget, or we get caught up maybe, in how important parents are in the process. And I know sometimes it can feel like parents don't want to be involved, or they just maybe don't seem like they care, but they do. They really, really do. Parents, I mean, as a parent myself in this day and age, it's so different. You know, we have so much more stuff going on, and especially right now with the current situation, being a parent at home with my child 24/7 is not easy. It is challenging, and with him being on the spectrum and the high energy that he has, it is not always a fun experience. So I think we need to remember that, and remember that parents are capable and they are competent, just like as much as we trust children with that they're doing what they can right now, and we need to remember that. Okay, so we want to make sure that we have an image of the parents as well, just like we do for an image of the child. The third protagonist is the teachers or educators or adults, however you want to describe them in your program. And we need to make sure that we have a strong image of the educator, just like we do for a strong image of the child. A lot of the time, I find the conversation always revolves around only the children, but really the conversation needs to be around the children and the educators and even the parents. All three of these parties have an integral role, and within this approach, they all work together. They all need to communicate. Everybody influences everybody. As I said earlier, there's equal roles. They're collaborative. There's this level of trust that can be created when you really start to look at all of that and how it all works. So, as I said before, the biggest thing that I think you guys should be focusing on is looking at creating these images. So I wanted to look at more deeply into the image of the educator, and I read a wonderful article by Beth McDonald, and she is the director of a Montessori program. I forget what, I think they're in Minnesota. I'm hoping I'm getting that right. And I had the privilege of listening to her talk here in Winnipeg a couple years ago now, I guess. And so she is a Montessori program, but they've also really embraced the Reggio Emilia approach. And so she works very closely with the educators from Reggio Emilia. And so we were able to listen to her talk, and she wrote this wonderful article on the image of the teacher. I like to say educator just because in my world teacher means school teacher, so I use educator because that's just how I speak. But other people use teacher or adult or whichever, so the term is interchangeable, I guess. So this is just a quote from her article here. Do early childhood programs have a strong image of its teachers? An image that embraces and supports competency, complexity, creativity, experience, and expertise? Do we embrace an image of teachers who are listened to, respected, supported, and encouraged, and who are also critiqued and held to a high level of responsibility and dedication to improving the life of children and families? So these are really great questions to be reflecting on, to engage in conversation with other educators, with your admin team. Even in the article, she talks about how, how is it reflected in our pay and our sick benefits and sick time and all of that stuff. An image of the educator is not just in how we interact with the children, it's reflected in everything that goes along with it as well. So I will put a link to that article as well in the notes of this video too, so you guys can take a look at it because it's really good. So I encourage you guys to use those questions to engage in some conversation, and I hope that maybe we will do that in this group later on as well. Okay, so here's my first step for you guys. This is what I think that you guys should be focusing the most on, is creating your image and reflecting on what you think your image of the child is, what is your image of the parents, and what is your image of the educator. This is the foundation of doing anything else within your program if you want to embrace this approach. You can go and change all the baskets in your environment. You can bring in all the mirrors you want. You can change all the things over that you want, but it's not going to do much if you don't have these questions answered, because this is reflected in everything else that you do. It's reflected in the way you interact, in the way you communicate, in the kinds of materials that you bring in as well, okay? So this is the major first step that you guys need to do, is creating your image of the child, the parent, and of the educator. Okay, so I think this quote is really important for many reasons. Our job is too difficult and too beautiful to do it alone. Now, this relates to what is currently happening right now. We cannot do our jobs alone. We need a community to help us get through, a community to lean on, to listen to the tough days, to listen to the good days, to keep encouraging us to get through all of this. And we also need our parents, and we need the children as well a part of that community, because that's what this foundation, that's what this philosophy is built on, is community. And right now, that is exactly what we need. It's just our community has changed a bit right now. I would say it's gone a lot more online, which I know can be challenging with going against some of the things that we know are good for children, but our world looks a little bit different right now. So there are still ways to engage in connection just using technology instead, and then just encouraging parents to continue that inquiry in their house with the objects that they already have as well. So the other thing I wanted to talk about, because I think this is also really important too, is the 100 languages of children. So again, this information here comes from the article that I will post, and the article is the values and principles of the Reggio Emilia approach. So, and it's written by the educators from Reggio Emilia. So yeah, this is what it says here. The Altair contains a great variety of tools and resource materials, along with records of past projects and experiences. What is done with the materials is not art per se, because in the view of Reggio educators, the children's use of many media is not a separate part of the curriculum, but inseparable, an integral part of the whole cognitive symbolic expression involved in the process of learning. So children learn in all different ways. I've talked a lot about how it is a very holistic experience, and that is exactly what this approach does as well. So children use their entire bodies. They use every single learning domain. They use their sensory systems to learn all the time. It's not just one or the other. It's literally their entire bodies. Everything is going at the same time. Now, for me, when I started learning about this, I love the different ways that it's expressed, that children express through their learning through art and music and stories and building and all of that, and it's beautiful. But for me, my personal story with this, when I really, really got it, was when I was learning about our son. So our son, for those of you who don't know, he was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder at the age of 2.5, and this was right around the time when I was also embracing this approach and starting to learn everything. I was probably like a good year into my program. Yeah, I was a year into my program around the time that I was starting to embrace this approach, and just before we got diagnosed as well. So there was a lot going on, but I believe it's integral to how well our son is doing because of this approach as well. It allows me to see the whole child. So getting back to why I was saying when I understood the 100 languages of children, it was through my son when he was having a lot of difficult times, a lot of challenging behaviors, a lot of meltdowns, and then just other different ways that he engaged in the world that I didn't always totally understand. And when I got it was when I started learning about sensory systems, and how he learns is by using his sensory systems all the time. Like, for one, what he loved to do was he would love to dump a lot of glass stones and shells and stuff onto the floor. Now, a lot of people would think that it's a mess, but for him, what he would do is that he would start swishing his body through the pile, and he was happy as a clam. He would crawl back and forth, back and through them. And what I realized is that he is so unbelievably sensory, and that he needed all of that tactile input that was happening and the visual experience of seeing the glass stones and the shells moving, and the impacts he was getting in his knees and arms by crawling on the floor, and the sounds that were happening while he was crawling through it all. And for me, that's when I learned that this is one of his 100 languages. He learns through his sensory systems, and he needs to be able to do this kind of play to be able to learn. So that's kind of when I realized it, that it's not always just going to be the art or the drama, because he didn't do that kind of stuff. He learned in such a very unique way. So that's when I got it. So I hope that'll make sense. And I'm wondering if maybe you guys are seeing kids in your programs that are really expressing their languages in ways that are not typical ways that we see as well within this approach. Okay, so a lot of the time you will hear that I'm Reggio Inspired, okay? And to be honest, that's what we are, because you can't really say that you're, I follow the Reggio Emilia approach, or I'm a Reggio Emilia school, because you're not in Reggio Emilia. So what we can do is we can use the resources from the educators in Reggio Emilia. And that's what I encourage you guys to do when you're first starting out with it, or even you've been doing it for a long time and you want to review some stuff. It's really important to use resources from the educators there, because that's what we want to build our strong foundation on of this approach. You definitely can look for influences and inspiration from others like me who share their stories and their journey. And so we want to lay the foundation with the image of the child and the parents and the educators, and we want to use that stuff to get us going. And then we want to learn from others to figure out how to embrace it into our own practices, because it's going to look different everywhere. Nobody is going to look the same, because the children and the parents that we currently have in our program are going to influence the way that we do things, the way that we set up our environments, the way that we communicate, because that's how it is. It's a really like unique individual experience, and it's not a cookie cutter thing. It's not a checklist of things that you need in your space or anything like that. It is a way of thinking, and you're constantly reflecting and changing your views and engaging in dialogue and getting feedback as well. Okay, so definitely listen to other people, take inspiration from them, but you also want to make sure that you're figuring out how to put it into your own context as well. Okay, so my process, and I have talked about this before, but my process for embracing this approach was I researched, and then I reflected, and then I renewed. So within the research, I definitely used sources from the educators within Reggio Emilia. I used a specific book called Working the Reggio Way, and that's a great book. I highly recommend it because it talks about how to embrace this approach in an American classroom. Now, I'm within Canada, but Canada and the States can have some similar thinking and stuff, so I felt that book was really helpful to get me going. It definitely helped me create a really strong image of the child. So then I also was in a lot of Facebook groups, and I listened to other educators and kind of what they were doing and how it was working for them, and I thought about how I can maybe make that work for me. And so I just did a lot of research, and then I started to reflect, and this is key. This is where a lot of my growth came from, was building a reflective practice and asking myself questions, looking for those connections between the images of my protagonists and oh, hello. So it's sorry you guys, I lost my train of thought here. So yeah, so building my reflective practice was key to this, and I strongly encourage you guys to spend the time thinking and writing and engaging in dialogue, and it is so important. That is the key thing for me, it was, at least, to embracing this approach and really realizing that it is a way of thinking. And then the last thing I did was I renewed all areas of my practice. So I took those reflections and the research that I had been doing, and then I started to implement it into my practice. So that looked like I would start to change the way I interacted with the children and the parents, the kinds of ways that I communicated with everybody, the ways that I changed my environment to reflect my image of the child and to reflect the community that I wanted to create within my program as well. And it also really started to reflect the individuality of the children that I had in my program, including myself. And I really wanted everybody to feel connected in their space. And that never stops. This process here, it never stops. You continually research, reflect, and renew. It never ends. Well, I always like to say it's a journey. There is no endpoint to embracing the Reggio Emilia approach. It is it's a constant learning experience. Everybody's starting point looks very different, and everybody's journey is going to look extremely different along the way, but that's where there's so much learning that can happen amongst our communities. And I really believe the more that we engage in conversation with our fellow educators, the stronger our profession will be. Okay. So lastly here, oh, I have two slides. Sorry, I thought I was on my last one. Okay, so ways to communicate your new approach that you're going to do this. I wanted to talk about this because when I was going to start up just a preschool program out of my home, I was doing an open house. I was talking about how I was Reggio Emilia Inspired, and some of the parents that came through for the open house, they came into my home and they were like, "What is this Rego thing that you are talking about?" And so I realized that even though I knew what this approach was, that I really had to spend more time on educating the parents about what it was and how was I going to do that. So, because it was totally new and it's still really new to a lot of people. So I have 4 ideas here. So if you are already running a program and you want to start doing this, the simple thing is explain why. And that was the very first thing we started talking about, was why do you want to do it? What intrigues you with it? That kind of stuff. So explain why you want to do this and communicate that to the children, the parents, and your fellow educators, especially if you're working in a team. I was working by myself, so I just had to make sure that I really understood why I wanted to do it and then be able to communicate that. Okay. Then you want to ask for feedback. As I've said before, it is a collaborative approach. It is not one person is going to do something and here's everything that's going to happen. It's a give and take. They have equal roles. Everybody plays a part. So you want to make sure that you're asking for feedback on how they're liking the new changes, what they are liking, what they aren't liking, and including the children in that as well, and your team members, because everybody should be a part of the process. Now, when it comes to like community events, such as your open houses, or sometimes people have art exhibits and stuff, use these large gatherings to discuss the new approach and explain why you want to do it and any changes that have been happening. So that just opens up an opportunity for dialogue as well, and to build those connections with all those protagonists in your center, the children and the parents as well. So another great way to communicate your new approach that you're wanting to do is use articles and videos and photos of the children to help explain what's happening. So the articles that I'm going to share with you are pretty in-depth. I can definitely find some other pieces that would be great to help educate parents, like that video that I showed at the beginning. That would be a wonderful video to share in an email or put on your website as to what this approach is. It's 2 minutes. It explains everything. That's why it's called Reggio Emilia in a nutshell. Okay, so it's a fabulous video. And then when you're having those large events, or you want to start doing documentation in your environments, having photos of the children and just little blurbs of what they're doing and what they're learning, and the questions they're saying, that is a really simple, easy, and effective way to start showing the benefits of this amazing approach as well. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about, and then you get to see me again, is just this picture here. It's kind of like a metaphor thing. So, I've talked about how the foundation of this approach is getting a strong image of the child, of the parent, and of the educator. So think of it as a collage. There's lots of different layers. There's not a step-by-step. Everything with this approach is intricately intertwined, okay? Everything is somewhat on top of each other. Some of it's going in a different direction, but everything is moving together and is connected. So if you have a foundation that is not strong, if you don't have a strong image of the child or of the parent or of the educator, everything is going to fall apart. So an example of this would be this art piece that's happening here. If you use a foundation of, say, flimsy cardboard, and you put all of this glue and all of this paint and all of this other stuff, and you're not using a strong foundation, it's not gonna stay. It's gonna start leaking through the bottom. It's gonna start ripping and tearing, and it's not gonna stay connected and intertwined and strong. You need to have a strong foundation, and that is starting with your image of the child image of the parent, and image of the educator.
Thank you so much for watching. I want to hear your thoughts on this video and topic, so leave a comment on the blog. You can follow along by subscribing to the blog or my YouTube channel, and stay connected on Facebook and Instagram. I will see you next time.